All right. Hi, my name is Carson Williams. The movie that I decided to do my review over was, let me go full screen here, The Patriot. Go to the next slide. So some information about the movie. It was directed by Roland Emmerich. I think I'm saying that right. He's a pretty famous director. He did Independence Day, and I think he did a couple other movies, but I can't really think of them off the top of my head. This movie released in the year June, or in the year 2000, in the month of June. Um, so summer month, not long before the 4th of July, kind of maybe festering up some Independence Day emotions and feelings, probably, I would imagine. Um, in the year 2000, obviously, what is that? Probably like 10, 15 years roughly after the Cold War it had officially ended or whatever. Just for some context there. Had a lot of different actors and actresses, but the main two that I could think of, the two most famous, the two most prominent, would be Mel Gibson and Heath Ledger. Um, Obviously, two pretty big names right there, a couple of powerhouses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of talk about the plot of the movie, and then I'm going to mix in like the historical accuracy and the historical context as I go throughout the plot of the movie, if that makes sense. I'll do my best. Um, but here we go. So it starts off, um, it actually starts off with this dope quote, is the very first line of the movie. And it kind of draws you in. It gets you on the edge of your seat, if you will. Um, the quote is, I have long feared that my sins would return to visit me, and the cost is more than I can bear. And right off the bat, you're on the edge of your seat and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And then it cuts to this man farming and ends up it's Benjamin Martin. He's a single dad. His wife is dead. He has seven children, which I think today sounds like a lot, but at this time, I think people were just having a lot of kids. I think that was kind of part of it. He has seven children, and they all live in South Carolina. The movie starts in the year 1776, and essentially, the family gets some mail, and they need to go down to the biggest city in South Carolina, I think. Maybe Charleston? I'm maybe not. I could be way off there. I probably should have looked that one up. That one's on me. But they go down there because Benjamin Martin is on like the board. You know what I mean? He's like he has a say in what the state of Virginia decides. He's a representative, I guess, or not the state of Virginia, the state of South Carolina. Sorry. He's a well-respected man in the community. Why? Because he fought in the French Indian War and he's kind of a war hero. That's what we're getting at. Okay, so he has seven children. The two oldest is Gabriel, age 18, and Thomas, age 15. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But he goes to this meeting where all the representatives are, and they're talking about should we get into war with Britain? Should we not get into war with Britain? And there's this great debate going on, and finally Benjamin Martin speaks, and when he speaks, the whole room goes silent because everybody respects him. And he basically says, we need to try to continue to act diplomatically. But they're like, we already tried that. The only way is war. And Benjamin Martin says, all right, I'm for liberty, I'm for freedom, but I got a family I got to take care of. I'm not going to vote. The state ends up voting like they should go to war with Britain. That's what the country decides. So they go to war. Gabriel enlists for the army. Benjamin is not too happy about it, but Gabriel's pretty adamant for the cause. And Thomas, age 15, wants to fight, but he's obviously too young. So some historical, context or whatever for from this part of the movie. Pretty accurate in the sense that most people did want liberty. Most people in the United States, they did want liberty, the vast majority. But there were some who were a little bit concerned about taking on Britain. Britain's this powerhouse. They're this world powerhouse. And the United States, we're just a couple farmers. You know what I mean? We're just farmers fighting Britain of all people. Like this is huge. So a lot of people were kind of concerned about that. But and then there was even some, there were obviously loyalists, some who were siding with Britain, saying we shouldn't go to war, we should remain loyal to Britain. And there's one example of this. in the movie of a guy who's a loyalist. And we'll end up talking about that a little bit later. He's kind of a scumbag, but okay. Part two here. So Gabriel's off at war. Benjamin decides to stay with the family, try and keep the family together. Ends up the battle comes to him. It's on his ground at his house. Not much he can do about it. There's this great big battle. He doesn't really show much of the battle, but there's a lot of people injured, both on the American side and the Britain side. So he decides to just be like, make a little hospital house. He's helping people out, trying to bandage up the wounded and whatnot. When all of a sudden, this British commander, this big British commander comes in. His name is Colonel Tavington. We don't know much about him at this time. He's kind of just being introduced in the movie, but he's got one of those faces, one of those bad guy faces, and you can kind of tell. And it turns out from the first scene, yes, he is a terrible dude. Ends up being an absolute brutal scene, like a legitimately terrible scene where they kill all the injured American soldiers. They take Gabriel and they're going to hang him. And the second oldest son, Thomas, as we see here, age 15, he's like, no, I'm not going to let that slide. I'm not going to let them take Gabriel. And he goes to try and rescue Gabriel. He gets shot and killed. And Benjamin sees this and he's ticked, obviously, rightfully so. And the British go to burn his house. It's a mess. Benjamin loses a ton. He loses his second oldest son. It looks like his first oldest son has been captured. He's going to be killed. His house is burned down. He's lost everything. And remember, he's a war hero. Like this guy, he knows what he's doing. And they just kind of poked the bear and they don't really know it. Benjamin gets very mad. He takes two of his other sons, who are very young. I can't remember exactly how old, but they're like probably somewhere between 9 and 13. They're young. And they go to rescue Gabriel, and they do so successfully. They kill some people. Benjamin kills some people with an axe in a pretty brutal manner, but I think it was justified, to be honest. Um, they get back, they get Gabriel back. They go to their aunt's house, and Gabriel ends up joining back with the army, and Benjamin reluctantly joins with him. And they kind of start a ragtag group that fights guerrilla warfare against the British. And the main American guy, one of the generals, one of the higher ups, is okay with letting Benjamin take the lead on this because again, Benjamin's this war hero. And this ragtag group of volunteers that they go to get has a wide range of age, beliefs, and even race. Right? There's some old people, there's some young people, there's even a minister who ends up being a part of the army, and then there's even a black man who ends up being a part of this little group. And then I also put there's a Frenchman. So some historical context for this part of the movie. I think the brutality in the movie, while it definitely did happen in real life, perhaps it's a little bit overplayed, especially like how it's weighed out. The movie completely shows British being this big, awful group, and the Americans don't really do a whole lot wrong in the movie. When in reality, it was maybe a little bit more balanced. But it makes sense that it's like this in the movie because they're trying to paint the British in a bad light and the Americans in the good light because it's an American movie. It makes sense. Um, Guerrilla warfare was pretty big. Britain's army was huge. Like you weren't going to beat them straight up. There was no way. So guerrilla warfare was necessary if they wanted to have any chance at winning. So I think that's pretty good accuracy in the movie there. Um, the black man fighting with the Americans. The British are shown a couple times in the movie, like capturing the former slaves of the Americans and making them fight, and they're kind of shown as like this evil people towards the blacks, while the Americans are shown in this good light for the blacks. When in all reality, the British side also had, the standard that if blacks fought for the British side, they would be freedmen after the war was over. So it was a little bit more balanced than the movie showed. And then the French, the movie kind of paints the French in a bad light, having them show up late when in all reality, the French were just trying to be a little bit more strategic, I think. They had just lost to Britain in a war not too long before this, so maybe trying to be a little bit more strategic, and the movie maybe paints them in a bit of a bad light. So anyways, with all that being said, they form this ragtag group, and this group is winning a ton, and they can't seem to lose until this Colonel Tavington guy. They do a little ambush, they do a little surprise attack, and it works. And many Americans are captured, but thankfully Benjamin uses like some wisdom and negotiation skills to outmaneuver General Cornwallis. Now, I haven't talked about Cornwallis yet. He's above um, this Tappington guy. He's above him. He's like the general. He's the guy in charge, and he seems like a gentleman in the first half of the movie. But after Benjamin does this, it embarrasses him. He's embarrassed, and then he's like, "Okay, you know what, Tappington? I'm gonna let the dog off the leash. You can go ahead and be brutal to the innocent people, to the civilians. I'm just gonna turn my eye. I'm not looking." And that's what he does. So then Tappington, with this permission, he begins to go out and just to some towns that have been known to help out the U.S. Army, and he's slaughtering them, slaughtering all of them, the women, the children, the old men, the young men, the boys. It doesn't, everyone's dying, everyone's getting it. And it's pretty brutal. In the midst of this brutality, there's kind of this ray of hope, right? Gabriel meets this girl named Anne. Well, I guess they had met a long time before, but they're in love and they get married, and it's really, really cool. It's a nice scene. And there's like this ray of hope. There's been these brutal, brutal murder scenes, and it's been terrible. But finally, there's this ray of hope between Gabriel and Anne, a young couple, 18 years old. They're getting married. It's really cool. And then boom, the marriage is short-lived. Anne dies immediately. She burns to death with the rest of her town in a church. By who? Tavington. Bad guy. He kills all of them, slaughters all of them. It burns them alive in this church. Gabriel rides up just a little bit too late. The whole ragtag group, they see this a little bit too late. They realize what happens, and Gabriel is pissed. Well, sorry, maybe I shouldn't have said that one. Gabriel is ticked, and he goes to kill Tavington, and he's unsuccessful. He gets close, but instead, Tavington ends up killing him. And again, for context, brutal things happened, no doubt, in the war. Innocent people were killed, absolutely. I think, again, in this movie, maybe it's a touch bit overplayed because I mean the Americans really don't do anything bad in this movie. There's one instance in which they killed a soldier who was trying to surrender, but outside of that, Americans don't really do anything bad, and the British are painted in a really, really, really bad light, which might be kind of fair, but it's still maybe a little bit overplayed in the movie. I just want to point that out. So Gabriel dies, right? We saw that. Benjamin Martin at this point, he's ready to throw in the towel. He's lost too much, right? His wife was already dead before the war. Then he's lost his house. He's lost Gabriel. He's lost Thomas. He's just done. He's lost too much. He's done. But while he's like in the process of like giving it all up, ready to just go back home, he realizes how much this cause, how much this liberty meant to his son Gabriel, and he decides to fight on. And he leads the U.S. Army to a big time victory over the British, and Benjamin Morton ends up killing Colonel Tavington, and it's this beautiful, it's awesome scene. And if you've watched the movie, this Tavington guy, he's a bad egg. You know, you've been rooting against him this whole time, and finally, they've had him cornered a couple times, and he's escaped, and he's lived, and he's killed people, but finally, Benjamin Martin gets him, and it's this awesome moment. It's really cool, and the U.S. Army wins, and it's a good time to be an American. Like watching it, it's like you get this sense of pride in you a little bit, I think, or at least I did. Maybe I shouldn't, but I did. And then a little bit after, the French finally show up, and the war is won. Historical context on that, the French ended up showing up in 1778. So just like 2 years after the war started, they ended up showing up. So they did show up a little bit late, but again, I don't think that's necessarily because they are cowards. Maybe they're just being a little bit strategic. The movie ends with the United States obviously winning the war, and they kind of start to build back everything that had been lost. Overall theme, um, the main revolutionary theme that the movie portrayed in my book was sacrifice. At every turn during the movie, at least one character was sacrificing an incredible amount in the name of freedom. We see this with not only with Benjamin Martin, we especially see with Benjamin Martin, but not only him. Pretty much every member of the ragtag group that he assembles sacrifices something, whether it's their lives, whether they die, whether they lose a loved one, whether they lose a limb, whatever it may be, they sacrifice something. But the other theme would be revenge and perseverance. Despite the fact that they're losing all these things, and it hurts, undoubtedly, they're willing to do it. They're willing to persevere because the end goal, the end mission, liberty and freedom is absolutely worth it in their eyes. And it's kind of a beautiful thing. And then revenge, yeah, absolutely. Like you can tell Benjamin Martin is driven by revenge after Thomas dies and then again after Gabriel dies. He's driven by revenge, not just patriotism. Yes, he wants liberty. Yes, he wants freedom, but ultimately he's upset and he's mad that two of his children have been killed. I think that's the main factor that's been driving him. Closing thoughts. Um, this is a fiction movie, but the historical accuracy was a lot better than I was expecting. I'd watched the movie a long time before, but it had been a while. And now that we had learned a little bit about the American Revolution, I was like, "Oh, I'm about to watch this, and it's going to be way off." And I watched it, and it it was all right. It was a lot better than I was expecting historically. Certainly far from perfect, but better than many war movies in terms of accuracy, especially for a movie that's fiction. Benjamin Martin's a made up guy, so I was kind of impressed. I was kind of surprised by that. Overall, the movie was very, very good. I thought it did a good job with historical accuracy for the most part. And it was very interesting to see, some of the things play out that we've been talking about in class and things. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all that I got. So.